everyone, it's Anna with the Wilkinsburg Library, and we are here for part 2 of the adventure of the cheap flat. If you missed part 1, just scroll down the page a little bit and you can play it. We also have a synopsis of where we left off in the description if you need a little refresher. So let's begin. "Are we going to break into the flat?" I asked dubiously. Poirot's answer was not too reassuring. "Not precisely today," he replied. Pulling on the rope, we descended slowly till we reached the second floor. Poirot uttered an exclamation of satisfaction as he perceived that the wooden door into the scullery was open. "You observe? Never do they bolt these doors in the daytime, and yet anyone could mount or descend as we have done. At night, yes, though not always then, and it is against that we are going to make provision." He had drawn some tools from his pocket as he spoke, and at once set deftly to work, his object being to arrange the bolt so that it could be pulled back from the lift. The operation only occupied about 3 minutes. Then Poirot returned the tools to his pocket, and we reascended once more to our own domain. On Monday, Poirot was out all day, but when he returned in the evening, he flung himself into a chair with a sigh of satisfaction. "Hastings, shall I recount to you a little history, a story after your own heart, and which will remind you of your own favorite cinema?" "Go ahead," I laughed. I presume that it is a true story, not one of your efforts of fancy." "It is true enough. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard will vouch for its accuracy, since it was through his kind offices that it came to my ears. Listen, Hastings. A little over 6 months ago, some important naval plans were stolen from an American government department. They showed the position of some of the most important harbor defenses, and would be worth a considerable sum to any foreign government. That of Japan, for example. Suspicion fell upon a young man named Luigi Valdarno, an Italian by birth, who was employed in a minor capacity in the department, and who was missing at the same time as the papers. Whether Luigi Valdarno was a thief or not, he was found 2 days later on the east side of New York, shot dead. The papers were not on him. Now, for some time past, Luigi Valdarno has been going about with a Miss Elsa Hart, a young concert singer who had recently appeared, and who lived with a brother in an apartment in Washington. Nothing was known of the antecedents of Miss Elsa Hart, and she disappeared suddenly about the time of Valdarno's death. There are reasons for believing that she was in reality an accomplished international spy, who has done much nefarious work under various aliases. The American Secret Service, while doing their best to trace her, also kept an eye upon certain insignificant Japanese gentlemen living in Washington. They felt pretty certain that when Elsa Hart had covered her tracks sufficiently, she would approach the gentleman in question. One of them left suddenly for England a fortnight ago. On the face of it, therefore, it would seem that Elsa Hart is in England." Poirot paused, and then added softly, "The official description of Elsa Hart is height 5'7", eyes blue, hair auburn, fair complexion, nose straight, no special distinguishing marks." "Mrs. Robinson," I gasped. "Well, there's a chance of it anyhow," amended Poirot. "Also, I learned that a swarthy man, a foreigner of some kind, was inquiring about the occupants of number 4 only this morning. Therefore, mon ami, I fear that you must forswear your beauty sleep tonight, and join me in my all-night vigil in the flat below, armed with that excellent revolver of yours." "Rather," I cried with enthusiasm. "When shall we start?" "The hour of midnight is both solemn and suitable, I fancy. Nothing is likely to occur before then." At 12 o'clock precisely, we crept cautiously into the coal lift and lowered ourselves to the second floor. Under Poirot's manipulation, the wooden door quickly swung inwards, and we climbed into the flat. From the scullery, we passed into the kitchen, where we established ourselves comfortably in 2 chairs, with the door into the hall ajar. "Now we have but to wait," said Poirot contentedly, closing his eyes. To me, the waiting appeared endless. I was terrified of going to sleep. Just when it seemed to me that I had been there about 8 hours, and had, as I found out afterwards, in reality, been exactly 1 hour and 20 minutes, a faint scratching sound came to my ears. Poirot's hand touched mine. I rose, and together we moved carefully in the direction of the hall. The noise came from there. Poirot placed his lips to my ear. "Outside the front door. They are cutting out the lock. When I give the word, not before, fall upon him from behind and hold him fast. Be careful, he will have a knife." Presently there was a rending sound, and a little circle of light appeared through the door. It was extinguished immediately, and then the door was slowly opened. Poirot and I flattened ourselves against the wall. I heard a man's breathing as he passed us. Then he flashed on his torch, and as he did so, Poirot hissed in my ears, "Allez!" We sprang together. Poirot, with quick movement, enveloped the intruder's head with a light wooden scarf, while I pinioned his arms. The whole affair was quick and noiseless. I twisted a dagger from his hand, and Poirot brought down the scarf from his eyes, whilst keeping it wound tightly around his mouth. I jerked up my revolver where he could see it, and understood that resistance was useless. As he ceased to struggle, Poirot put his mouth close to his ear and began to whisper rapidly. After a minute the man nodded. Then, enjoining silence with a movement of the hand, Poirot led the way out of the flat and down the stairs. Our captive followed, and I brought up the rear with the revolver. When we were out in the street, Poirot turned to me. "There is a taxi waiting just round the corner. Give me the revolver. We shall not need it now." "But if this fellow tries to escape?" Poirot smiled. "He will not." I returned in a minute with the waiting taxi. The scarf had been unwound from the stranger's face, and I gave a start of surprise. "He is not Japanese," I ejaculated, with a whisper to Poirot. "Observation was always your strong point, Hastings. Nothing escapes you." "No, the man is not Japanese. He is Italian." We got into the taxi, and Poirot gave the driver an address in St. John's Wood. I was by now completely fogged. I did not like to ask Poirot where we were going in front of our captive, and strove in vain to obtain some light upon the proceedings. We alighted at the door of a small house standing back from the road. A returning wayfarer, slightly drunk, was lurching along the pavement and almost collided with Poirot, who said something sharply to him which I did not catch. All three of us went up the steps of the house. Poirot rang the bell and motioned us to stand a little aside. There was no answer, and he rang again, then seized the knocker, which he plied for some minutes vigorously. A light appeared suddenly above the fanlight, and the door was opened cautiously a little way. "What the devil do you want?" a man's voice demanded harshly. "I want the doctor. My wife is taken ill." "There's no doctor here." The man prepared to shut the door, but Poirot thrust his foot in adroitly. He became suddenly a perfect caricature of an infuriated Frenchman. "What, you say there is no doctor? I will have the law on you. You must come. I will stay here and ring and knock all night." "My dear sir." The door was opened again. The man clad in a dressing gown and slippers stepped forward to pacify Poirot with an uneasy glance around. "I will call the police." Poirot prepared to descend the steps. "No, don't do that, for heaven's sake." The man dashed after him. With a neat push, Poirot sent him staggering down the steps. In another minute, all three of us were inside the door, and it was pushed to and bolted. "Quick in here!" Poirot led the way into the nearest room, switching on the light as he did so. "And you, behind the curtain." "Si, signor," said the Italian, and slid rapidly behind the full folds of the rose-colored velvet which draped the embrasure of the window. Not a minute too soon. Just as he disappeared from the view, a woman rushed into the room. She was tall, with reddish hair, and held a scarlet kimono round her slender form. "Where is my husband?" she cried with a quick, frightened glance. "Who are you?" Poirot stepped forward with a bow. "It is to be hoped your husband will not suffer from a chill. I observed that he had slippers on his feet, and that his dressing gown was a warm one." "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" "It is true that none of us have had the pleasure of your acquaintance, madam." "It is exactly to be regretted, as one of our number has come specially from New York in order to meet you." The curtains parted, and the Italian stepped out. To my horror, I observed that he was brandishing my revolver, which Poirot must doubtless have put down through inadvertence in the cab. The woman gave a piercing scream and turned to fly, but Poirot was standing in front of the closed door. "Let me by!" she shrieked. "He will murder me!" "Who is that?" croaked Luigi Valdano, asked the Italian hoarsely, brandishing the weapon and sweeping each one of us with it. We dared not move. "My God, Poirot, this is awful. What shall we do?" I cried. "You will oblige me by refraining from talking so much, Hastings. I can assure you that our friend will not shoot until I give the word." You sure of that, eh? Said the Italian, leering unpleasantly. It was more than I was, but the woman turned to Poirot like a flash. What do you want? Poirot bowed. I do not think it necessary to insult Miss Elsa Hart's intelligence by telling her. With a swift movement, the woman snatched up a big black velvet cat which served as a cover for the telephone. They are stitched in the lining of that. Clever, murmured Poirot appreciatively. He stood aside from the door. Good evening, madam. I will detain your friend from New York whilst you make your getaway. What a fool, roared the big Italian, and raising the revolver he fired point blank at the woman's retreating figure, just as I flung myself upon him. But the weapon merely clicked harmlessly, and Poirot's voice rose in mild reproof. Never will you trust your old friend Hastings. I do not care for my friends to carry loaded pistols about with them, and never would I permit a mere acquaintance to do so. No, no, mon ami. This to the Italian, who was swearing hoarsely. Poirot continued to address him in a tone of mild reproof. See now what I have done for you. I have saved you from being hanged, and do not think that our beautiful lady will escape. No, no, the house is watched back and front. Straight into the arms of the police they will go. Is not that a beautiful and consoling thought? Yes, you may leave the room now, but be careful. Be very careful. He is gone. And my friend Hastings looks at me with eyes of reproach. But it was all so simple. It was clear from the first that out of several hundred, probably, applicants for No. 4 Montague Mansions, only the Robinsons were considered suitable. Why? What was there that singled them out from the rest, at practically a glance? Their appearance? Possibly, but it was not so unusual. Their name, then. But there's nothing unusual about the name of Robinson, I cried. It's quite a common name. Ah, sapristi, but exactly. That was the point. Elsa Hart and her husband or brother, or whatever he really is, come from New York, and take a flat in the name of Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. Suddenly they learn that one of these secret societies, the Mafia or the Camorra, to which doubtless Luigi Valdarno belonged, is on their track. What do? They hit on a scheme of transparent simplicity. Evidently they knew that their pursuers were not personally acquainted with either of them. What then can be simpler? They offer the flat at an absurdly low rental. Of the thousands of young couples in London looking for flats, there cannot fail to be several Robinsons. It is only a matter of waiting. If you will look at the name of Robinson in the telephone directory, you will realize that a fair-haired Mrs. Robinson was pretty sure to come along sooner or later. Then what will happen? The avenger arrives. He knows the name, he knows the address. He strikes. All is over. Vengeance is satisfied, and Miss Elsa Hart has escaped by the skin of her teeth once more. By the way, Hastings, you must present me to the real Mrs. Robinson, that delightful and truthful creature. What will they think when they find their flat has been broken into? We must hurry back. Ah, that sounds like Jap and his friends arriving. A mighty tattoo sounded on the knocker. How did you know this address? I asked as I followed Poirot out into the hall. Oh, of course, you have the first Mrs. Robinson followed when she left the other flat. Ah, la bonne heure, Hastings, you use your grey cells at last. Now for a little surprise for Jap. Softly unbolting the door, he stuck the cat's head round the edge and ejaculated in a piercing meow. The Scotland Yard inspector, who was standing outside with another man, jumped in spite of himself. Oh, it's only Monsieur Poirot at one of his little jokes, he exclaimed as Poirot's head followed that of the cat. Let us in, monsieur. You have our friends safe and sound? Yes, we've got the birds all right, but they haven't got the goods with them. I see, so you come to search. Well, I am about to depart with Hastings, but I would like to give you a little lecture upon the history and habits of the domestic cat. For Lord's sake, have you gone completely balmy? The cat, declaimed Poirot, was worshipped by the ancient Egyptians. It is still regarded as a symbol of good luck if a black cat crosses your path. The cat crossed your path tonight, Jap. To speak of the interior of any animal or any person is not, I know, considered polite in England. But the interior of this cat is perfectly delicate. I refer to the lining. With a sudden grunt, the second man seized the cat from Poirot's hand. Oh, I forgot to introduce you, said Jap. Mr. Poirot, this is Mr. Burt of the United States Secret Service. The American's trained fingers had felt what he was looking for. He held out his hand, and for a moment speech failed him. Then he rose to the occasion. Pleased to meet you, said Mr. Burt. And that is the end of The Adventure of the Cheap Flat. I hope you enjoyed this short story that we read. We'll be back this coming Tuesday at 8 o'clock with another short story. And please let us know in the comments if you are enjoying these stories, if you have any special requests, or anything else like that. And as always, stay safe, stay home, and stay calm. Good night.